Well, I picked pretty much the rainiest day of the year so far to do this, but the way these press cars work is you get an email and someone says, hey, someone from one of the press car fleet management companies says, hey, I'm going to have this vehicle, in my case, I'm going to have this vehicle in Salt Lake City over these dates. Are you interested in testing it out? And well, I usually say, oh yeah, okay, that sounds interesting, sure. So I end up with all these kind of wild card vehicles from different automakers, some of which I'm personally interested in, and some of which I know very little about. I'm a huge car enthusiast, but I'll admit there are kind of corners and different segments that I'm just not super familiar with, and this vehicle behind me fits into one of those segments. It's a 2019 Lexus UX 250h. So the UX is Lexus's new subcompact SUV. It's a popular segment right now. The UX is actually, what a lot of people don't realize, it's based heavily on the Toyota CHR, which is Toyota's subcompact SUV. Excuse me. Unlike the CHR, the UX is available in hybrid form, which is the one I have here. As soon as I got in this vehicle, I kind of wrote it off as being a little impractical, but the more I drove it over the course of this week, the more I came to understand it and see a lot of merit in several of its attributes. So without further ado, here is a little tour of the Lexus UX 250h. So on the outside here, obviously this thing is pretty small. It has the same footprint as the Toyota CHR, like I mentioned. It's a subcompact SUV. If this were 15 or even maybe 10 years ago, this would be considered a hatchback. But given that everything needs to be an SUV today, it has all-wheel drive and a slightly raised ride height, and therefore Lexus advertises it as an SUV. That's just the era that we live in. I think it looks kind of cool. They did the best they could with the proportions they were given. Like most front-wheel drive-based vehicles, it's got kind of a long nose. Overhangs aren't too bad. I think the side profile is actually, it's kind of growing on me. It's got a little bit of a swept back look. One of my favorite design elements, I could do without these plastic fender flares here. This thing has zero off-road capability. Who are we kidding? But one of my favorite design elements is the rear taillight bar. Let's see if I can get it to light up. Maybe it's too bright outside. But the rear taillight strip lights up there, so you get kind of a Tron look on the back. The roof rails are maybe functional. I think they would be functional, but they don't have any attachment points here. So they're semi-functional, we'll call it. I like the color. It's green. Green is generally a good choice, at least in my opinion. So it's raining pretty hard, and I think we've about covered the exterior, so I'm going to hop inside now. Okay, now that we're inside here where it's somewhat less wet than it is outside, I'll start this thing up. And it's a hybrid, so it starts up pretty silently, just like any other Toyota hybrid product. Here we go. So no engine startup, just electric motors. You can hear everything but the engine. Moving around in here, I mentioned this vehicle's relation to the CHR. Luckily, it's not just a rebadging. Toyota's pretty good about not doing that, especially today. So inside, it feels pretty Lexus. Granted, this vehicle is the least expensive Lexus. I have the window sticker here. And I believe we're looking at a sticker price of around, let's see, $42,000 even as equipped. So you'll see this is a 2019 Lexus UX 250h all-wheel drive in Nori Green Pearl. Its base price is $34,000, and then when you add all these options, we get to that as optioned price of $42,000. Fuel economy is pretty good. 41 city, 38 highway, and 39 combined with this hybrid powertrain. That said, this vehicle is in a class down from the RAV4, and it actually gets the same fuel economy as the RAV4 hybrid, so that's worth noting. So, fuel economy from this thing is good, but it seems like it could be a little bit better. Moving around the interior, this is a soft touch material. This is a different soft touch material. You've got leather down here. Got pretty standard Toyota switchgear right there. One thing about this door panel is that this is a pretty large rectangle of plastic right there. It would be nice to see something to break that up a little bit. But anyway, moving on. This leather up here, I do like the color of this leather. It's like a kind of a caramely basketball brown color. But this leather up here, you can kind of tell it's I'm going to call it brushed. It has a mild texture to it. You can see it pretty well there. You can see it on the edge there. It kind of looks like it was just brushed in two different directions with like steel wool or something. I'm certain that that's not how they actually achieved this finish, but I think that's the best way to describe it. Kind of looks like a USPS mail envelope, if you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, moving on. Lexus is still using this funky gauge hood design that was originally used on the LFA supercar that hasn't been in production in about a decade, where they include adjustments for sport, normal, and eco, so adjustments for your different drive modes, and then just your stability control on-off switch here. This is a dial. This is just an on-off switch. So that's kind of funny. Anyway, steering wheel's a nice design. I think Lexus's steering wheels are generally one of their stronger design areas. No paddle shifters on this thing. It's a hybrid. Along in here, I kind of like this layout here. So your buttons are all along here, and you can see that where it has these little dots on it, they're actually up and down switches. So like this is just a down switch. So you can't press it up. But these actually go up and down, so you can adjust your fan speed, up, down, temperature, up and down. The buttons feel good, good quality, typical Toyota quality. Everything's pretty sturdy. That wobbles a little bit. So this is a Lexus, but it's an entry-level Lexus, which I think is important to keep in mind. But, like any Lexus Toyota product, it's going to last forever. This thing has heated and ventilated seats and a heated steering wheel. You've got this funky Lexus touchpad that most people either love or hate. This thing has Apple CarPlay, but it does not have Android Auto, which is kind of a strike against it here in 2019. But anyway, this touchpad's not, there is a bit of a learning curve. It frustrates some people. If you get frustrated easily, you're going to be frustrated by this thing. It's just a little bit touchy. It's hard to land exactly on what you want at first, but I think it's something you get used to. And it clicks. It's kind of hard to press. It takes a pretty firm click. But anyway, this is something new. It's your volume, radio, media, and tuning controls are all on this little extension of the center armrest here. So you turn your volume up on the radio via this dial. You cycle back and forth. It's a little funky. You get a tuning dial, buttons here, 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 here. And yeah, that's a unique design element. Several times over the course of my week with this vehicle, I've reached up for a volume knob here, only to realize it doesn't even really have a volume knob. It has this little volume, I guess you call that a dial. It's kind of a knob, but you know what I mean. Moving on, perforated leather. There's a couple different things going on with these seats. This is kind of cool. You get this, a solid headrest and solid bolsters. You get perforated leather here, this black strip, and then this funky triangular pattern on the sides here. It's not stitched, it's more embossed, I guess you could say, but it adds a little sportiness to this thing, I guess. Moving on to the back seat, more of the same. Back seat's not perforated at all, which, if you're going to use it a lot, is kind of a drawback. Perforated seats make things a lot cooler in the summer. They cool down a lot faster. Anyway, sunroof, pretty traditional Toyota switchgear up here. No sunglass holder, which is a little bit of a bummer. You get this funky little SOS thing where there's a door over it so you don't accidentally press it. So you'd pop that down. If you were in a situation where you needed help, you'd pop that down and then push this button. Yeah, beyond that though, wireless charger. Wireless chargers are kind of a gimmick. They don't really charge your phone that quickly. It's nice to not have wires laying around, and it's good for a top off here and there, but if you're at 0% and need to get back up to 100, a wire is going to do that a lot faster. Then your 12 volt outlet here. Move inside the console. This is kind of a funky design. It opens from the left or from the right. And it does that via this kind of cool hinge setup right here. I tried to open it on both sides, like open it from here and then open it from there, but it's designed in a way that it only lets you open it from one side, excuse me. But believe me, I tried. Aux port and 2 USB ports in here. I'd like to see USB-C in these vehicles. It's a pretty safe bet. I know Toyota's really conservative, but it's a pretty safe bet that USB-C is the future at this point. It's pretty obvious, so I'd like to see those incorporated more into vehicles. Electronic parking brake down here. Push it down, it's on. Pull it up, and it's off. Glove box. You've seen a glove box before. And yeah, let's take a look at the back seat. Looking at the back seat of the UX, so I did move the seat back pretty far just to do that video, but you can see the normal amount of legroom up here. Not a lot. If you're going to be transporting people often, I'd recommend probably going one step up to the Lexus NX. That's their compact SUV. This is considered a subcompact, but there's one seat back pocket. Driver's side seat back does not have a pocket. Not much else back here. You get air vents and two 2.1 amp USB charging ports. There you go. Regular old USB-A. Center armrest with 2 cup holders. There you go. And now we'll take a look at the rear cargo area. So this thing does have one little novel feature. You can swipe your foot somewhere under the tailgate. There we go. Got it on the first try, and it opens automatically. So, you know, pretty much hatchback amount of space back here. This thing's a little cool. It's a cargo cover, but it's just like a net with a wire frame around it, and then it just uses these little cords and that little tab right there to lock itself in place. Let's see. No spare tire kit in this thing. Interesting. Like every Lexus, you get a first aid kit. Little hook back here. Yeah, there you go. 12 volt outlet. Those are nice to have. Another hook. Looks like a speaker. Some lights. Yeah, pretty basic rear cargo area. Power actuated, as I demonstrated before. Like on every vehicle today, you get a backup camera, although it looks like it's been smeared with butter. It's a pretty low-end backup camera, but there you go. Lexus UX. Just to wrap things up here, I mentioned that this thing grew on me over the course of my week with the vehicle, and that's really due to 2 main things. It's small, it doesn't have a ton of utility. Maybe all-wheel drive is nice in the snow, and sure, you can fit something into the hatchback that you wouldn't be able to fit into a normal trunked vehicle, but other than that, it is really small. That said, it absolutely kills it in 2 main areas. First being fuel economy. As I mentioned, 39 miles per gallon combined. That's pretty good. And it also isn't too bad to drive. I'm a big believer that if a vehicle isn't a performance car, it ought to be a hybrid. I think we should really commit to either performance or efficiency today. And as far as I'm concerned, this vehicle really nails it from an efficiency standpoint. The second thing is safety features. It's got all the latest safety technology, so it comes standard with automatic emergency braking, pedestrian detection, automatic high beams, which are awesome. Lane departure warning with lane keep assist, blind spot monitoring, this one has. And what else am I thinking? Radar cruise control. Yeah, so it's a full range radar cruise control, so it can actually do stop and go in traffic. I think. Yeah, all speed dynamic radar cruise control, so we can go down to 0 miles per hour, bring the car to a full stop, and start it back up again. If you're in stop and go traffic, so that's really nice. So on top of those two things too, this thing's just really maneuverable. I live in the mountains, so I spend a lot of time driving up steep canyons and doing a lot with gear and outdoorsy stuff. So it's got some limitations there. I think it is pretty small, and I think a bigger vehicle would be needed for anyone who likes to go on a lot of big trips and stuff. But for someone living in a city where efficiency from the standpoint of fuel and maneuverability are both a priority, I think this thing really, really nails it. And it's a Lexus, so obviously it's nice to drive, it's nice to be in. Heated seats, heated steering wheel, ventilated seats, a calming, comforting, high quality cabin, typical Lexus stuff. So there you go. I think this thing is kind of a hidden gem. $42,000 for this. You be the judge of whether or not it's worth that to you. But as it sits, I think that the UX Hybrid has a lot of strong qualities, and it certainly is probably the right car for a lot of people.